Welcome to a dialogue on accountability in the digital age. A dialogue with representatives of a global, multi-stakeholder community.
And I'm your host, Frits Busselmaker, and today I'm delighted and privileged to have a conversation with Dr. Hedi Nasheri. Hedi, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Frits. Thank you for inviting me.
And allow me to introduce you to our audience. You are a professor of cybercriminology and global security at Kent State University. Your expertise is intellectual property violations, cybercrime, corporate and industrial espionage, international terrorism, and trade secret theft. That actually is a lot of topics to talk about. But the reason I really wanted to reach out to you and have this discussion, you recently wrote an article, The Dumb and Dangerous Road Ahead, I know I found that on the Unicre website. And because let me start off with asking you a question based on a quote I found in an article. As people who watch these videos know, there are an enormous and growing number of policy initiatives to try to keep the potential of harm in check, but you quote, such measures may be insufficient. So that was for me the main trigger. So I'd like to discuss with you what's happening out there and what would you propose we do as a society?
I think that's a very important and complicated question to answer. One of the, I think, underlying reason for my statement that I had made several years ago in the article stems from the fact that we need to have a uniform definition in order to be able to implement effective guidelines, policies, and regulation and legislation. And this very much reminds me of years ago in connection with my graduate studies and academic research, looking at trade secret theft and intellectual property violations. And what was so interesting is that obviously United States, as #1 producer of products and ideas in the world, we have a lot at stake to protect our intellectual property, obviously, because it's the backbone of economic sustainability and strength, and it plays a major role in national and global security as well. And what was interesting is that in 1996, during President Clinton's administration, for the first time, theft of proprietary information, sensitive information, which is trade secrets, became criminalized under United States law. Prior to that, we had a hodgepodge of state legislation on this issue. And so we developed legislation, and it is a criminal offense, and as I mentioned. And what is interesting is that other advanced economies in Europe and in common law systems similar to what we have were all interested in this new initiative. However, even to this day, today, there isn't a uniform definition of what trade secret is.
Okay, interesting.
And it's very parallel to what we are experiencing and going through with respect to AI. And all of this are intertwined and connected. You mentioned that intellectual property violations, trade secret theft, cybercrime, emerging technologies, they are all interconnected. So if you're looking at how can we improve cyberspace security, how can we mitigate cyber intrusions? How can we eliminate the possibility of breaches that result in theft of proprietary and sensitive information? We're really talking about the same thing. Except it has many different components to it.
Yeah.
Obviously, with the advancement of internet, theft of proprietary information became a lot easier. With some of the technologies that were developed in the past 20 years, it made it easier and easier. And now with AI, it's accelerated and facilitated that prospect to a level that not only law enforcement grapples with, policymakers grapple with, technologists themselves grapple with, and governments grapple with this issue. So it has added emerging technologies like AI, like robotics, like 3D, like drone technology, all have added a layer of complexity to the pre-existing cyber issues that we've been dealing with and trying to make progress. And one of the major issue is obviously the private sector have access to a lot of resources. They are in forefront of this. They're the driving force behind all of this. And in a way, government lags behind because government, and I'm using singular term, but it's all governments,
yeah.
They are at the mercy of the big tech for the engineering insight,
yeah.
the technology insight, and the objectives are not the same. The goals are not the same. Governments try to protect the rights of citizens in democracies, in advanced economies. They want to protect their citizens. They want to protect their communities, their society. Big tech has a different agenda that's not within their realm of function or agenda. And so we have a very, yes, it is a very interesting time period in the history of humanity, in the history of science.
Okay, let me break it down to a couple of thoughts I had when you explain what's happening out there. First thought, we'll come back to that. A couple of ideas. First of all, we haven't a uniform definition yet. My argument was, well, I don't care what the definition is. If I see an abuse, and in most cases it's obvious, I don't care what really the problem is. We need to fix this. So to what extent is not having a definition really stopping people to do what they should be doing? Maybe that's a first, maybe you're going to first response on that. So how important is having...
Yes, it is, because we need rules and regulations to create some control, some enforcement measures. And in order to have those rules and regulations and language, we need the definition. And it can't just be from United States perspective. This is a global issue.
Yeah.
We need to have a collaborative definition and understanding in order to be able to develop and implement measures, since this is a borderless thing, just like the internet.
Yeah.
So if you have legislation in the United States that stops at our jurisdiction and borders, the same with Europe, the same with other advanced economies, we need to have international rule and regulation on this. And therefore, the definition is very important.
Okay, I got that. I understand that point of view. Then I would look at the OECD website, and they have, for instance, a library now of about 600 regulations in the world they've identified for AI.
Mhm.
So each country in the world can adopt 3 completely independent standards, frameworks, and all these frameworks have definitions. So some people are out there. So it's not having the definitions, what I see, it's how do we get people to accept a common definition? So
And that ties into another major issue, which is people's acceptance of emerging technologies, in particular artificial intelligence. And how do you get people to accept this? It's all based on trust. And how do you build that trust? Because I don't think that the big tech is doing themselves a favor with the approach that they've taken since 2022. Listen, we have some of the biggest companies in the world that happen to be US companies. We have Microsoft, who has invested 13 billion in OpenAI. We have OpenAI, which is now worth 80 billion. And OpenAI was initially founded on this fundamental notion of good for humanity and
Yep.
access for everyone. And I'm concerned and afraid that not with any ill intention or purposeful intention, but things are not actually panning out that way. The promise that was initially made, from my perspective, it's not going to happen.
Okay. Let me then reiterate the question. What do you propose we do? Because
As advanced economies and nations that support democratic principles, I think Europe, United States, United Kingdom, Australia, Canada, other advanced economies, we have that a lot of the same objectives, and our systems are based on rule of law and democratic principles. And in order to be able to accomplish control and perhaps fair use and fair treatment and upholding those democratic principles, which we all value very much, we need rules in place with enforcement behind them, not just people saying we have these regulations, it's in this white paper or in this report. It has to have enforcement power in order for it to accomplish something.
okay. I got you could say segue here, because first question is, if we have that, who would be the organization who would then maintain those rules and manage them?
So far it seems like United Nations has taken a very proactive role in artificial intelligence. United Nations is an entity that has representation from all over the world. Perhaps not perfect representation, but more so than any other entity. It would seem that it would be a logical entity to lay the path forward to possibly have uniform enforcement and mechanism in place that is respected by all member states and abided by.
Okay, let me continue on that, because I understand United Nations could be probably the best place to have this organized, but one of the issues they are facing is the very fast developing digital technology provided by those platforms you just mentioned, and the legal and regulatory framework we just cannot keep up with. So I understand the concept, but it's my concern is, or my question is, how are we going to deal with the time issue that one is moving at a much different pace than the other? So will United Nations ever be able to keep up with, or actually?
I think that United States plays a major role in this process. Beside the fact that the companies are all based in the United States, I think that our government has a lot of authority and power that they can exercise with respect to the big tech that are all housed in US.
Yeah.
And possibly take measures here at home to implement some sort of control. And when I use the term control, I am not arguing that technology is stoppable. On the contrary, technology is not stoppable. However, decisions that we make today are extremely important beyond our jurisdiction in the United States. It's the world that we're creating. And I'm not sure that everyone on the technology side, from the corporate sector, has a full understanding of the consequences of their actions.
Yeah, because in this discussion, what's also coming to my mind is if the leadership, both in government and in private sector, would have a better understanding of the consequences, they might realize it's a burning platform. So what's your take on, I'd say, the level of knowledge policymakers have in the States that makes them aware or maybe not aware of, hey, this is where we are, we need to do something about it?
I think that the government in the United States has full understanding of this technology, its danger, its risks, and consequences. However, they don't have all the experts and the resources that the big tech has. And the leaders in our government in US have tried to facilitate conversation with big tech, bring them around the table, and create those discussions that would bring the big tech around to recognizing, hey, this drone technology in the wrong hand can really be detrimental to a region or people or anything, as far as attacks, as far as terrorist acts, as far as cyber intrusion acts. So what I'm concerned about and I think about is whether those engineers, those individuals that train the models within the big company, they are ultimately making huge decisions that have impact on my life, on your life, and humanity, and countries, and the world. And I'm not sure if the tech engineers that are involved in the process are focused on those issues. And that's, I think, the major problem you see.
So and that's also something a government could do, I would imagine, is then you have to go way back to school, say, hey, the minute you're going to be trained as an engineer, these are mandatory courses to follow, that at least you plant a seed with people, hey, look, there is this ethical issue, this responsibility and accountability issue, and it starts with you at the end of the day.
And exactly, and while government agencies in the United States are taking actions within the government to implement rules that would prevent harm from happening as much as possible in certain sectors, like hiring, like recruitment, education, defense, military, a big, huge topic, all of this. Criminal justice, a very sensitive area that hasn't been resolved, or people are working on it. They have the power to do that. There is another issue and problem, which my heart actually goes out to folks in government. You see, the big companies like Microsoft, Google, OpenAI, Meta, Facebook, and the list goes on and on. They basically clean up all the talent on the market with big salaries.
Yeah.
And how can government compete with that? They can't. And just like in other positions, for example, but it becomes more crucial in this area, because if all the tech savvy from MIT and Caltech and Carnegie Mellon and all the people that are getting very special training are going to work for the private sector, this is not helping the government initiative. And one of the biggest challenge is shortage of expertise for hiring purposes in the field, and in particular within government agencies. And the challenges are quite a few on many fronts. And you see what's happening with the big technology companies. I've been working in this field since 2016. The voices that were always ringing alarm, the siren, it seems like they've gone away almost, because you see the big tech, they get their checkbook out. And
Okay. Potentially, isn't that the solution then quite simple? Just get government, get your checkbook out.
well, what do you mean? I'm saying that the big tech, some of those research entities or engineers that were concerned about some of the issues, it seems like we don't hear that as much.
No,
In
I
fact,
realize that, but if the issue is, say, private sector pays more than the public sector, that's actually a simple fix. Just pay more or pay the equal level.
well, the big tech, that they're running a business.
Yeah.
Government is
No,
is
I accept that, but I accept that it's not a business, but it's a question.
No, they're running many businesses, in fact.
Yeah,
You
okay.
know what? Yeah. So the resources have to go a long way for many different objectives.
I
And
understand that, but it's
you can never make the same amount of money that you do in private sector in government sector. That just
I
is not
realize,
feasible.
no, I realize you should not be having that argument with you, given your position, but it would be interesting just to ask a government person, hey, why not do pay that amount so you are competitive, and then you might get the talent you need, because the question is, can you afford not to do it, given what you've shared of what the potential risks are? And also, given the time, Hedi, I have a couple of other questions I really want to
Sure.
cover with you, because I do realize it's a broad topic we're covering. One of the things, I mean, we now focus on AI, like the main technology assumption here. Would it be then sufficient that we regulate just AI and the rest will take care of itself? Or because it's all interconnected? Or do we still need to be mindful of other leading edge technology out there coming to us? So first of all, how do we approach that? All the other technologies, seems that they're not getting that attention today as AI is getting it. Should we be concerned about those technologies?
I think when you talk about emerging technologies, you're talking about, as I mentioned before, 5G, you're talking about 3D, you're talking about Web3, you're talking about metaverse, you're talking about virtual reality, augmented reality, you're talking about robotics, and the list goes on. But AI is the main component that all of these sensor technology, satellite technology,
Yeah.
they all make each other work. So they're all interdependent on each other.
Okay, but my question, I understand that. My question then is it sufficient then to regulate the binding factor, AI, so that's AI, or that is, if it's naive, if we only do that, because we also made them certain that all these other cybersecurity attacks could still happen even without AI. So
I think we need to have specific sector legislations and rules. That's very important. And cyber intrusions, cyber crime, it's always going to happen. It boils down to what defense mechanism and protection you have in place for prevention and mitigation, and then also what rules you have in place for prosecution and investigation, and empower agencies to be able to do their job.
yeah, because it reminds me of one of the last comments you made in your article, which I found quite scary. You mentioned that cyber attacks can also disrupt chemical, biological, and radiological and nuclear facilities. So turning these facilities actually into a weapon itself. And actually, they're all weapons of mass destruction if you approach that. How big is this risk? You made that statement there. Is that why that?
I think it's a massive risk. It's what we need to be focused on. And there is, we're also consumed and focused now on AI, but quantum is coming.
Yeah.
And it's not that far away. And that itself, if we don't figure out certain things prior to that, the risks will be tremendous.
Okay. What's the low-hanging fruit? Where can we start today?
I think we've grabbed all of those already. I don't think there is any left.
Okay. Who should be at the table to make certain that we find a result we all agree on?
The reason I mentioned United Nations is in a good position to facilitate this process is because it is the only entity that I can think of that has a large number of representation from around the world. Another issue we didn't get into, we probably won't have time, is the digital divide. It's not something that's going to happen. It's already happening.
Yeah, it's already there. Yes. Yeah.
It's the digital divide is already there. And we need to have a balanced approach to this acceleration in development and innovation. And also, I'm not only talking about guardrails, because that doesn't do anything, but a mechanism to control things. Right now, there is not much control, not even here. And people have used the term the wild, wild west. I used it in my article several years ago. It's very much the case. It reminds me of the 19th century gold rush, Now the focus is how much money can I make on this? This is the entire focus.
Okay. Last comment, last question from my side then. You also quoted Stephen Hawking. He predicted AI one day might take over the world. You're almost describing a world where what he was afraid of already exists, or are we still able to turn it?
We're reaching, and he's not the only one. There are others. There are quotes from Winston Churchill that kind of alludes to the same thing. Other scholars and political leaders and figures that have written about the development of atomic bomb, and so we have many people that alluded to that fact. But what is so interesting, Fritz, is that in the past several years, the leaders of the tech companies, they all got together and wrote a letter to the Congress in the United States, to the government. They themselves asking, including Elon Musk and others. Now, if they're asking that this needs to be regulated and controlled, and they know the technology or are more knowledgeable, then that should kind of raise an alarm. But however, what I wanted to say in response to your question, a lot of people think that this world that we're talking about, possible risk to humanity and destruction and self-destruction, is in the distant future. I think the way we've been progressing, I'm looking from 2016, when I started looking at this topic from a research perspective, to now, it's amazing how fast things are happening with what you with the speed that is uncontrollable. Probably in the next 6 or 7 years, we will have a fictional world, a digital fictional world on top of the physical world. And people will be immersed in both worlds. Now, some people, and I'm putting it in very simplistic terms, what is the most concerning thing for me is, what does that mean for humans? What does that mean for humanity? What does that mean for logical reasoning? What does that mean for analytical skills? I used the GPS in my article, The Rise of a GPS Society. And I'm always amazed that when I talk to my students and some of the younger generation, if I ask them,
can you give me a definition of what a GPS society is?
it's when you're relying on technology for your decision making and your information. And I wanted to give you a simple example. Direction, for example, knowing where you're driving, getting from A to B. You'd be surprised if people will not be able to function without their GPS and their phone.
I unfortunately recognize that in my own home environment. Let's put it that way. Yeah.
Yeah, and that is what I'm very concerned about is this illusion of having choice, but with the way that we're approaching that technological, speed, is it going to be our choices? Is it going to be our decisions? When you and I get on Netflix and want to watch a show and we're done with that show, our TV is telling us what else we will like. And we'll click on those and we go. So you and I are not making those decisions for ourselves. What do I, read about it? What do I want to watch? What do I, So I'm using very simplistic answers to very complicated, good questions that you've raised.
Okay, so a lot of food for thought, Hedi, you've shared with us. Where you want to focus on in your own research in the future to make sure that you can make a contribution to mitigate the threats you just mentioned?
I'm in a process of completing my book on emerging technologies. It's going off to the publisher next week. And that's why this week is a very crazy week. And I've raised some of these issues in the context of risks, threats, and crime currently and in the future in my book. And I hope to be able to talk to you about it perhaps in the future, in the near future.
Sounds like a good idea. So once the book is out, we'll make certain that we provide a link to the book when we upload a video, so people can read more about that. And hopefully you've made me very curious about, hey, what else is out there, which I wasn't aware of. So I want to thank you for sharing that information with us. Yeah, it's a tough world out there. It's getting tougher. But hopefully by being aware what's out there, we could change it around. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.